Rome fought many campaigns in distant Britannia during its time, though today none are likely more famous than the Great Rebellion led by Boudicca, queen of the Iceni. However, her uprising was not the first time her tribe had attempted to resist Rome's advance, for in 48 AD the Iceni launched a brief but bloody rebellion in an effort to throw off Roman rule. The Romans first campaigned in Britain around the mid-1st century BC under Julius Caesar, but it wasn't until 43 AD that a serious effort would be made by them to permanently control territory on the island. At the behest of Emperor Claudius, a Roman army under Aulus Plautius swept across southern Britain, defeating all resistance and forging a new province for the empire. By the time Plautius departed to Rome in 47 AD, the Romans controlled a considerable amount of Britain, founding new colonies and building forts and roads to further consolidate their holdings. Not all of Britain had, however, opposed this invasion. Many Britons had also chosen to align themselves with Rome, among them being the Iceni ruled by King Prasutagus in what is now East Anglia. Initially, relations between Rome and the Iceni appear to have been good. However, this cordial situation would take a turn for the worst upon the arrival of Britain's new governor, Publius Ostorius Scapula. The temporary absence of a commander for the province had not gone unnoticed by the Britons, and the tribes still hostile to Rome took advantage of this to begin raiding the province. Scapula probably arrived after the winter of 47 AD to assume command and took immediate action against these raiders by dispatching several units of light-armed auxiliaries to intercept them. Once this threat was contained, Scapula planned to enact a mass disarmament of the Briton tribes who lived south and east of the Trent and Severn rivers in early 48 AD. It was not common practice for the Romans to do this. However, Scapula seems to have been especially concerned of the effect large numbers of armed Britons could have on the stability of his province, perhaps believing they would be especially inclined to incite unrest. Ironically, however, once the governor's plans became widely known by the Britons in these areas, it was this edict that led the Britons to rebel. Tacitus, our only source for these events, does not provide any specific details on why the revolt began, though we may speculate that the proud Iceni, who had a long history and martial culture, disliked having their arms and armor confiscated when they had not chosen to oppose the Romans in the first place. The Iceni were the first to rebel, but not the last, as several other smaller tribes soon joined them. Scapula would need to act quickly to defeat this rebellion, as the longer it remained unopposed and was allowed to gather more momentum, the more likely it was to escalate into an even greater war. The Britons seem to have been highly confident in their chances of success, and under the Iceni's leadership, they chose to concentrate their forces and oppose the Romans in open battle. The battlefield the rebels chose to make their stand in was described by Tacitus as narrow, restricting the Romans' use of cavalry, and was defended by an earth rampart. The site of this battle has been possibly identified as the Stonia Camp in Cambridgeshire, an old Iron Age fort built in a waterlogged region of the Fenlands. The Britons thus had a naturally well-protected position, further enhanced by man-made defenses, which was now defended by large numbers of determined warriors. Scapula was able to quickly gather an army to crush this rebellion, comprised entirely of auxiliary units. While we do not know how large either army was, Scapula's need to crush the rebellion quickly with the troops he could gather to his side the fastest may have prevented him from mustering a very large force, meaning the Romans would have to overcome a well-entrenched opponent while possibly being outnumbered. Despite this, Scapula was unconcerned with the Briton defenses and seems to have trusted in his troops' quality to carry the day. The Roman cavalry dismounted to join the infantry in storming the Briton rampart, who conducted a headlong charge against the enemy defenses. Unfortunately, Tacitus does not provide much detail about the course of the battle. Romans would have perhaps sought to scale the Briton defenses with siege equipment such as ladders, or by using their famed testudo formation as improvised siege ramps, as they were known to sometimes do. All the while, they were constantly pelted with missiles by the enemy warriors. Overcoming the strong Briton position may not have been easy, but eventually Scapula's troops prevailed and succeeded in breaching the rampart. The Britons' defenses now paradoxically worked against them, as they found they had nowhere to run and were trapped between their own fortifications and the wrath of the Roman army. Despite their desperate situation, the Britons continued to fight bravely, but were ultimately overwhelmed by the Roman assault. Scapula's family also earned even greater glory, as his son Marcus was rewarded with an oak wreath for saving the life of a fellow Roman citizen in battle. The Iceni's rebellion, which only a short time previously had been so confident of victory, had been crushed almost as soon as it began. The defeat of the Iceni not only had the effect of subduing the tribe and those that had joined them, but also suppressed any thoughts of rebellion from those Britons who had simply been waiting on the sidelines to see how far the revolt may progress. Scapula does not seem to have conducted any retaliatory strikes against the tribes that revolted, likely being content with crushing them in open battle, removing them as an effective military threat. King Prasutagus also continued to rule the Iceni for years after his tribe's defeat, though whether he directly fought in the revolt at all isn't known. In the years to come, Scapula and other generals would successfully extend Roman control of Britain further north, though it seems that the Iceni and those who had rebelled alongside them would not soon forget their humiliation at the hands of the imperial army. However, after Boudicca's revolt around 60 AD, the territory of the Iceni would see no further instances of rebellion, ending the last major Briton revolt against Rome. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like the video and subscribe for more content on Roman warfare, and check out the links to my other sites and ways to support the channel below.